I think you go on the 3 dots by their name if you click on where they are.
Ah, right, great. Okay. Okay, great. So Don, if I make you a co-host, then you can let people in. Great. Then I can just concentrate on what I'm supposed to be saying. Because I'm not great at multitasking. That's not been my great strength. So, welcome back, everybody. And hope that you've had a good week and a productive week, or as good as you can in the current circumstances. A bit of snow to add flavour to it all. I don't know if, this course, all our parenting courses are sponsored by the Rosemary Nathanson Charitable Trust. So Hilton was thinking of coming on, and I think Louise as well this evening, so I don't know if they're on or not, I didn't keep track. But if they are, I want to thank them for facilitating this particular course and all of our parenting stuff really, and giving me the privilege of co-authoring the book Everyday Parenting and Everyday Parenting for Everyday Parents. So it's always great when they are on board and gives me a chance to express my hakara sato, my gratitude to them for their partnership, friendship, and endorsement. Okay, let me just review where we got to last week. And here we go. Just a quick review of last week. Share screen. So this week is called Holding, Go, and Letting On. I presume you can all see the shared screen. Can you see the shared screen?
Yeah, we all can.
Great, lovely. So holding, go, and letting on, this is realistic parenting strategies. So just to summarize last week, which was called, why do we shout at the people we love? So we talked about the fact that we are living in unprecedented times. And these unprecedented times require different strategies. And first and foremost, we have to recognize that we have to understand that we can't parent in the way that we normally parent in normal times. And we spent some time delineating what makes this so difficult. One of the areas that makes it so difficult is that it's a strange thing, but we're not used to spending so much time with each other in the same house 24 hours a day. And even though, if you like, perhaps that's where it should be natural because we're one family, but it isn't. The way that our world is constructed is that we don't, most of us spend, what percentage of our day? Probably even hardly 10% of our day with the rest of our family. And now suddenly we're spending 100% of our day. And that makes it an opportunity and challenging, much as we love our family. We talked about the Torah definition of anger. Anger is the emotion we feel when there is a clash between the expectation of our world and the reality. Anger is the emotion we feel when our expectation of the world clashes with reality. We didn't bring the source for that. That's actually based on a classic Torah source. And it's a wonderful understanding of how anger operates because it gives us, number one, some sense of preparedness. And this emotion we feel there's a clash between reality and expectation. If that's what anger is, gives us an understanding of what triggers our anger and allows us to prepare for it and allows us to make adjustments where necessary. Why do we shout at people we love? Because we have higher expectations of those whom we love. We want more for them, so we expect more from them. In other words, our expectations are raised. If our expectations are raised, then there is more chance that we are going to get disappointed and angry. So why do we shout at people we love? Because it's quite simply, we want more for them. We care so much about them. Maybe even we care too much. Maybe we're overly invested in them in certain respects and at certain times. So we expect more from them. And then we talked about in the current climate, generally in life, if we can't change the situation, then we simply have to adjust our expectations. I say simply because it isn't so simple to do. But if we literally can't change the situation, then we have to adjust our expectations. And we actually quoted the Serenity Prayer of the Alcoholics Anonymous, that very beautiful prayer that God should give us the wisdom to understand what we can change, to accept what we can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference between those two situations. Now, and then we talked about one extract from our series on managing anger, and that is the emergency strategy. Think about the emergency stop when you're in a car. and we're trained to slam our foot on the brakes, to at least to stop before I metaphorically run over my child or verbally run over my child, at least to stop, simply stop what I'm doing as I feel the emotions, as I feel the irritation, as I feel the frustration, quite simply to stop. And then we talked about the beautiful Hebrew word, or the beautiful Hebrew language, where the word savlanut. Savlanut means patience, but in its essence, it means saval, which is to bear pain. We say it in the Haggadah, that the Jewish people suffered the siblos mitzrayim, the pain of Egypt. Patience requires pain. To stay patient, to bite our lip, to be able to interrupt that neurological pathway that sends us on a careering towards anger. To stop and wait. That is a painful process. So we stop, we make an emergency stop. We wait, and then we think. We ask ourselves one simple question, which we're going to elaborate on tonight, which is my reaction going to create more damage or more benefit? Is there another way of reacting? Can I react without anger? Will the gain justify the withdrawal, which we're going to talk about more tonight? Will the gain justify the cost? And then last week, and that's actually something I want to put in context, I talked about, as parents, we don't have to be perfect parents. Of course not. There's no such thing as perfect parents. I've got to tell you, as somebody who teaches parenting quite regularly, almost every day of the week, one of the most difficult situations that I sometimes face is when I actually haven't had a great parenting day myself. And then I've got to go out in the olden days, get in the car and drive somewhere, and then give a parenting class. Oh, that is so difficult. When it hasn't gone that well, or maybe I haven't been as patient like I want to be, and I've actually left the house and nobody's feeling great, and then I've got to give a parenting class. How difficult that is. So nobody gets it right all the time. Of course not. Last week I gave a kind of percentage, which I actually felt afterwards needed some clarification. I needed some contextualization. And that is as follows. Last week I said we're going to try and get it right 65%, 70% of the time. Let me clarify what that meant. And of course, it doesn't mean the rest of the time we can shout and scream and behave like lunatics. Of course, it doesn't mean that. And of course, we should aim for higher than that. What I meant was, if our home is functioning pretty well and is functioning in a wholesome way, 65, 70% of the time, certainly in the current circumstances, then we are doing well. We're doing well. As I said, it doesn't mean the rest of the time the place is wild. It means it's not, the rest of the time it's not functioning optimally, then somebody's a bit boisterous, or somebody's a bit upset, or somebody's not quite where we would like everybody to be. And there are moments of tension here and there. But if in the current circumstances, we're getting it right most of the time, and our home is functioning in a wholesome way most of the time, we're managing most of the time, then that is something to be saluted 100%. And we have to have realistic expectations of ourselves as well, not as well, but first and foremost. That was a summary of last week. This week, we're going to move on. Sorry, 1 second. Oops, sorry. Let's start off. Somebody in the waiting room. Donna, is that okay to let them in? Can you see that, Donna? Okay. Let's start off, because last week I left you with a question, which is, what is our role as parents? And I meant in the particular circumstances, but I want to go back to the beginning. What is our grand role as parents? And then I'm going to put the current circumstance in that context. And here, I'd like to quote from a book that I had the privilege of co-authoring. I think I've noticed now the Hilton is on board, so it gives me a chance to thank Hilton and Louise for their generosity in sponsoring the book and in sponsoring so many other things that we do on the parenting front. And in the book, we really build the whole book around a very, very important definition of our role of parents. It was always a dream for me to write this book, and great privilege to do so. And in Hebrew, in the Torah, education is called chinuch. Education is called inauguration. When you inaugurate a new building, so picture the scene, you've got a brand new building, maybe it's a new shul or a new school or a new community center or a new house, and you inaugurate it. Really, the word chinuch, education, comes from the word, is exactly the same as the word inauguration. Hanukkah is the re-inauguration of the temple. Now, what's education got to do with inauguration? So I'm going to give a kind of very short definition. When you inaugurate a new building, you prepare it for its purpose. So, for example, if it's a new school, maybe, or a new school, no one's ever actually walked in there yet. No child has been in there yet. But you've got all the dignitaries, you've got all the important people who are there, you've got the press there, and the building is sparkling and spanking new. It's been inaugurated. Beautiful how the Torah captures what real education is. Real education is to inaugurate a child for life, to prepare them for life. That's what it is, such that when they set sail, they have been equipped to handle life. So this is a definition that we gave in the book. To raise a child is to nurture a child to the point where the child is ready and able to fulfill their specific purpose in this world, using their unique strengths, and in brackets, and managing their weaknesses. To raise a child is to nurture a child to the point where the child is ready and able to fulfill their specific purpose in this world, using their unique strengths and managing their weaknesses. Of course, as the professor with whom I co-wrote the book added the sentence, of course we want them to be happy, we want them to feel fulfilled. But it's such an important definition. My role as a parent is to inaugurate them for life. Inaugurate them for life. And by the way, of course, it's not about me, it's about them. I'd like to put it in the following terms. In the old days, we used to talk about the 3 R's. I want to talk about the 3 E's, which is really translating this definition into practical reality. First of all, again, from a classic Torah point of view, we're actually custodians of our children. However our children landed in our arms, we don't own them. We don't own them. And there's such an important question. Those of you who have done the 3-part parenting series will recognize it. And there are some extracts tonight from that series. Are we in it for them or in it for us? Are we in it for us or in it for them? What's my motivation when I interact with them? What's my motivation when I make certain demands on them? Is it for them or is it for us? To achieve this goal, to nurture our children, to inaugurate our children, we need the 3 E's. To empower them, to equip them, to enable them. Empower them means giving them a sense of self-belief. I believe very strongly that the most important message I think that I can give my children is that they have been created uniquely with a unique role in this world. They've been created uniquely with a unique role in this world. And Hashem, God, has given them a specific role in this world. I was talking to a teenager the other day. No clues as to identity at all. But for various reasons, the teenager was going through a difficult time. And I asked the teenager for the Hebrew name. And they gave me the Hebrew name. And I told them what their name means. And I said to the teenager, do you know why Hashem created you? Because he needed a world with, and I quoted the child's name, let's say the child was Ephraim ben Manasseh, which it wasn't. He needed a world with Ephraim ben Manasseh. He needed you in his world. So he created you to fulfill a role in his world. I heard afterwards feedback that was the most empowering thing that I could have said. To give a child a belief in themselves. And belief means a belief in their intrinsic value, a belief in their role in this world, a belief in their ability to cope, etc. Next is to equip them with the skills. Actually, this equipment with the skills means actually the skills. So the skills means educational skills that they need to manage in this world. It means the life skills they need to manage in this world. It means the emotional skills they need to manage in this world. So we could spend some time on each of those. But in the emotional skills, it means the skills to handle life's ups and downs, to handle failure when we encounter it, to handle difficult circumstances. And the third E is to enable, to give them opportunities. Now, opportunities doesn't just mean career opportunities. It actually means opportunities to manage life. It means opportunities to manage life. A very good friend of mine, who is a senior partner in a prestigious law firm, that at the time, many years ago, when I spoke to him about this, told me they only took graduates from Oxbridge, and generally they only looked at the CV if the person had got it first. And he said it was fascinating how, when these people moved into the real world, quote unquote, having spent so many years in academia, high-level academia, many of them found it extremely difficult and crumbled at the first time they came across criticism from a boss. Even if the criticism was presented in an appropriate and a sensitive way. But the fact that they'd got it wrong, or the fact that they'd failed, they hadn't been equipped to actually learn how to manage the ups and downs and the challenges of life when it doesn't go to plan. Or to put it in our terminology, when our expectations clash with reality. Reality falls short of our expectations. So we need to empower their belief in themselves. We need to equip them with the educational skills and the life skills and the emotional skills, and we need to enable them with opportunities. Those are not just educational opportunities, but actually opportunities to practice these life skills. Actually opportunities to practice these life skills. Because if we don't give them, now obviously I'm not suggesting that we deliberately create situations of failure for them. But what I mean is, if we overprotect, we underprepare. And that's important. If we overprotect, we underprepare. So as life presents opportunities, whether we want them or not, we need to see them as opportunities to help my child learn to negotiate and to manage life. So as I said, while we're not looking for difficult opportunities, when they happen to come our way, we need to look at them as opportunities to enable my child to put those skills into practice. For a very good example is delayed gratification. Nobody succeeds instantly. Well, the truth is, in our world, sometimes children get the impression, teenagers, that you can have instant fame. You can have instant fame. There are people who put out stuff on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever it is, on YouTube, and have got tens of thousands, if not millions of hits and achieved instant fame. But that's actually not an appropriate message, because the vast majority of people who succeed in whatever field they are have done so with hard graft and with shattered dishmaya, with divine help. And therefore, it's not a great message for children to believe that they can get things instantly. Delayed gratification is one of the most important skills. And there I do need to create opportunities to enable them to learn to use those skills in the appropriate way. I must introduce one quote from Megillat Esther. Esther, as we know, was a Yosem. She was an orphan, and Mordechai adopted her. And Esther is the one person who did not want to be selected as queen, the one person selected as queen. Several years later, when Haman, the megalomaniac, decides to destroy all the Jews in one fell swoop, and Mordechai appeals to Esther to do something about it. And initially, Esther resists. She says, you know how it works. Achashverosh is highly unpredictable. I can't just turn up outside his door. I'm going to risk my life. And Mordechai says to her, maybe it was just for this moment that you were selected for royalty. Maybe it was just for this moment you were selected for royalty. Now remember, he was her adopted father. And as soon as Esther hears that, it's a fascinating moment in the Megillah, she takes instant charge. Instant charge. Clearly the education that he had given her had prepared her for this moment. And it's very interesting the way he puts it. Mi yodem le'ez kazos. He doesn't say to her, well, he does say to her, actually, that don't think that you'll save yourself in the palace. It'll be discovered that you are Jewish too. But when he actually challenges her, finally challenges her to take responsibility, he says to her, maybe it was just for this moment. And really leaves the next move to her. With all of the education that he's given her, a sense of a purpose, the skills to deal with it. And she does so with incredible ingenuity. The opportunities that unfortunately life presented her as an orphan, would it come together for her to take responsibility and take charge? And of course, from that moment, she takes charge. So as a kind of general, before we can answer the question, what is our role as parents in the specific circumstances we find ourselves in, I wanted to take a step back and ask, what is our role as parents generally? Our role is to raise our children, to inaugurate our children, to be able to manage life with all that it throws at them, with a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, a sense of belief in themselves, and having had enough opportunities to put that into practice and the skills to do so. It then follows almost axiomatically that in the current circumstances, what we have as our role of parents is really to put that into practice, albeit in extremis, albeit in extreme circumstances. So let's have a look how we do that. And we touched on this really last week. Let's start off with what I call a solid baseline. and I know we touched on this last week, but I just want to make it absolutely clear. If we are steering our family through, that means we're managing their physical and their emotional well-being most of the time, comfortably most of the time, their physical needs and their emotional needs most of the time. And we are there for each other. And we are trying to help each other and be as tolerant of each other as we can be. We're holding it together. Then I would say, somebody's come off mute for some reason. If you don't mind muting yourselves, please. Mute yourselves, please.
No.
Thank you. And so then, and I would say that even at a baseline, certainly if Hashem is part of our lives, then even at a baseline, we should introduce this as part of our lives. And to say that, you know what, clearly this whole situation is one that is beyond control, even of the superpowers, and even technology has not managed to, has taken a while to start to bring it under control, and it's still unpredictable. We have to see this as God putting us through some kind of test, some kind of challenge to enable us to develop as people. Now, we could discuss in more detail exactly how to utilize that, and we will come back to that briefly at the end. But that's the baseline. If we are steering our family through, that means managing their physical and emotional well-being most of the time, holding it together most of the time, introducing the fact that this is almost of, you know, this has a divine orientation, then I would say that is, then we are doing well and we can salute ourselves. And in terms of expectations, that's it. Then we are certainly meeting what I would call solid expectations. But perhaps we can achieve a little more. And I put this with perhaps in inverted commas because my goal over here is not to create pressure, but on the contrary, to relieve pressure. But nonetheless, I'm going to raise the bar a little bit more. Because if we see this in the context of our role as parenting, which is to nurture, to inaugurate the child, then actually there's also a teaching opportunity here when possible. Now, in the first lockdown, we were all very philosophical and all super positive, and we all had this whole incredible take on it all. Let's be honest, lockdown number 3, we're all worn out, the end of our tether, and it's very difficult to remain constantly positive, nor do I believe it's realistic. So I have put what I've done over here is kind of graduated some of the teaching opportunities that there are when possible. First of all, role model coping ourselves. How are we coping? How are we managing? And coping also means being real with ourselves. If we are having a bad day, and then it's okay to say, actually, I'm not doing so well today, and I need some time out, or I need to get some exercise, or I need to take a break, or I need to go for a walk around the block, or I need some time to myself. Because that's also coping. Coping doesn't mean that I'm always cheerful and always in a great space, because that's not real life. Role modeling coping means being positive when I can and teaching my children most healthy ways of handling it when I'm not feeling in a great space, when I need to look after myself, or maybe when I need looking after too, because that's also role model coping. And it's important that our children see how we manage when we haven't done well. By the way, I also feel that on those occasions when we fail and we get it wrong, so to role model, maybe we need to say to our children, you know what, I'm sorry I yelled, I'm sorry I shouted, without pushing the blame back onto them. I'm sorry I yelled, I'm sorry I shouted, you know, the circumstances are difficult, and I'm working on it myself. I think one of the most important messages we can introduce into our home is that we are all want to grow as people. All want to grow as people. I hadn't planned on putting this in, but it's such an important idea, and I think it's vital. If that's a message of our home, it's a very, very healthy message. It gives space for failure. It gives a constant sense that we're trying to grow. And also, by the way, it releases us from the charge of hypocrisy. Because I might say to my children, why are you so grumpy? Maybe an hour later, I'll be grumpy. Does that make me a hypocrite? Well, it would if I insist that nobody should ever be grumpy, but it won't if my mantra is, you know what, we're all working to grow. That's part of Judaism. That's part of life. And yes, today I didn't do so well. I'm working at it. I also want to grow as a person. So role model coping, role model realistic expectations, ups and downs. So and how am I doing in terms of that? So to be able to say to my children, you know what, actually today I really don't feel up to that. I don't feel up to that. I don't think I'm going to cope with that well. I'm sorry. Today I just need to do something else which is easier. I know you're right. We said we'd get around to this. Maybe it was a task I said I would do, but actually today I don't think I can cope with it. And I'm just feeling the strain, I'm feeling the pressure, and I'm just trying to be real with myself. I'm not going to do a good job today. So to role model realistic expectations. So those, where we can introduce those are fantastic teaching opportunities, which will basically be giving our children the ease of skills and the ease of opportunities of enabling. Of course, saluting resilience. When a child shows resilience, they've sat through another Zoom lesson for a third or a fourth hour. That's resilience. They've managed to do a piece of homework when they didn't really want to, even if it's not to the standard that they normally would. That is resilience. A very good way, they have managed not to explode at their sibling when in a situation like this, they normally would do. It's so interesting how we often salute resilience for things that they do, but don't necessarily salute it when it's things that they haven't done and might normally do. That's tremendous resilience. In the Torah, it tells us, in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, the greatest strength is self-control. When a child shows self-control against the odds, that is resilience and needs saluting. Even if 7 times out of 10 they didn't, and 3 times out of 10 they have, salute that resilience. There's nothing more encouraging than the positive feedback, and that encourages the child to do more. Searching for positivity. Now, it was, again, in the first lockdown, we were all confident this was going to be a positive experience. In lockdown number 3, it's much more difficult. But we need to search for positivity when we can. So, for example, let's say you've sat around the supper table and everybody's schmoozed nicely for 10, 15 minutes, doesn't really matter, before somebody's jumped off the table or complained. So you know what, just to simply say, you know, this lockdown is not easy, but I do enjoy spending time with you all. Search for the positivity. It may only be fragments across the week, or you sit around together for a Friday night meal, and everybody has a good laugh about something, and you simply say, you know, it's so good to laugh together. So good to laugh together. It's such a good tonic to laugh together. So look out for those moments of positivity when they are. Doesn't matter if there's 1 a week, or 2 a week, or 3 a week, or 1 a day, or 2 a day, or 3 a day. Look out for those moments of positivity. Don't overdo it in reaction. Simply observe that it's nice. Observe that it's good, and observe that you're enjoying it. Search for those moments of positivity. And actually, if you reflect on the day that you've had, which is towards the end of the day, I would suggest, and I can certainly think of it for myself, there were moments of positivity, certainly, that I didn't salute. And actually thinking about it, I could have done. It's not too late to say, you know, it was nice over lunch where we sat together and had a little bit of time with the phones off. Let's take it up a level. And these are all, I've graded these in terms of easiest opportunities to more difficult opportunities. Last week we raised the issue of giving it a philosophical dimension. And I'm going to do this, and notice that we see God's hand in both the baseline and teaching opportunities. So I am giving a talk, which I think somebody were interested in, called Finding God Through Vulnerability. But a key component is, when life has challenges, do we see life as on hold or life as ongoing? Life as on hold means saying to myself, you know what, at the moment, life just isn't happening. I believe that is not a positive way of looking at life, because then we don't feel motivated, then we feel time is wasted, and we don't feel productive. The Torah perspective would be, actually, life is a constant, ongoing journey. Now, it may well be that this is not a journey that I anticipated, or this is not a part of the journey that I anticipated, but life is an ongoing journey. So I'm a bit conflicted here about sharing something a little more personal, but I think I will, if you don't mind, because I want to illustrate this. So some of you may be aware, so the last few years I have had a health challenge. Thank God I'm in a much, much, much better space, but I am on ongoing treatment. But as I said, a good, stable, strong place, thank God, thanks to everybody's prayers a lot. Over the years, so many people use the terminology battle. We've got a real battle. So I had various rounds of chemo, etc., a real battle. I have never, ever, the terminology of battle has never worked for me. I'm not saying it doesn't work for others, but it didn't work for me. Because my thinking was, if it's a battle and there's a treatment that doesn't work, then I've lost a round. So I've never used the term battle. In fact, I've always corrected people when they've used the term battle. I prefer to use the term journey. If it's a journey, then the destination remains the same. Every day can be productive. And yes, we hit roadblocks. We certainly hit some pretty dramatic roadblocks, but the destiny always remained exactly the same. So without going into specific details, I remember one particular roadblock where I had to explain to my children over the phone what had happened, because I was in hospital at the time, over the phone. And I said to them, I've got to tell you that actually we've got a bit of a traffic jam at the moment. Destiny remains the same. The driver, the Almighty, remains the same, but we've hit some traffic, so there's going to be a bit of delay in the next stage before we can find our way through. Now, so as I say, that may not work for everybody, but I feel that certainly in terms of what we're going through now, to see it as a journey means that, oops, no, that's the wrong thing. To see it as a journey means that we can see it as a journey. Can you still see my screen or not? No. Sorry, I did the technology wrong there. And as I said at the beginning, I can't really multitask, so I won't. Okay. To see it as an ongoing journey gives the present meaning. It retains meaning in the present, despite the difficulty of the circumstances. And it allows us as parents to then use the opportunity to help our children see what they can learn on the journey, from the journey, and through the journey. And in that respect, it really brings us to a very important question, which is, how will they look back on it? Please God, in a few months' time, how will our children look back on it? Now, again, I don't want to put anybody under pressure, so please remember my baseline. If they look back on it and say, you know what, we managed as a family. You know what, most of the time we did all right, we managed, and things functioned. That's excellent. That's superb. That's positive. That means they would have learned some coping lessons along the way. If they can look back at it and remember the moments that they laughed, remember how we handled it, remember that we gave it a philosophical dimension, remember we found those opportunities to highlight and celebrate resilience, then that's even better. That's even better. But that's really, how will they look back on it is a great question to ask ourselves. Overall, doesn't mean today, if today wasn't a good day, okay, but overall, when they reflect back on the whole thing, how will they look back on it? Okay, I'm gonna, let's very briefly look at some realistic strategies, principles extracted from the 3-part parenting course. So I'm really going to refer to these very, very briefly. First, because a number of you have done the course, and I work on the assumption that you remember everything I ever told you, of course, but also because this needs more time than we have. But I'm going to take just three principles from this. Remember, in parenting, especially parenting teenagers, well, actually parenting all children, the relationship is everything. The relationship is everything. And it's absolutely vital that we do our utmost to maintain that relationship. And that is ultimately the most important component in parenting, is a good, strong relationship with our children. By the way, and it's never too late to improve the relationship, because really every child wants a relationship with their parents, without any question. Every child wants a relationship with their parents. In extreme circumstances, that may not be healthy, but I've never met a child that doesn't really yearn for a relationship with their parents. So if we feel our relationship needs improving, then we need to improve that. So I'm not going to go into specifics as to how to do that now. We cover that in our course, but there's no question about it. It's never too late to raise the bar and to improve the relationship. And there are very productive ways of doing that. But in the current situation, the relationship is more important than anything else. Yeah, and I believe it's more important. You may not agree with me, but it's more important than GCSEs, and it's more important than certain tasks. It's very important. Empathy is vital. Our children are going through a tough time. We mentioned last week, and we know this full well, that the peer environment for a teenager is everything. It's their oxygen. The peer is their oxygen. If they are being deprived of their proper peer relationships, and screens are not proper peer relationships, they are being deprived of oxygen, and they deserve understanding and empathy. They need understanding and empathy. And empathy means unconditional listening. It means validating their emotions, validating their feelings, and not being dismissive of them. We all think we're good listeners, but research demonstrates that most people are not good listeners. Because listeners means undiluted attention. It means validation without judgment, and it means really helping the other person feel that I know where they're coming from. Number 3, and again in our course we spend much more time on this. This should say the relationship bank. Sorry for the typo. By the way, this fantastic PowerPoint was done by my 19-year-old daughter. I must credit her for doing such a beautiful job. Relationship bank, I should say. When it comes to relationships, they operate a bit like a bank. And again, this is an extract. In other words, as follows: we want to keep our relationship in credit. We have to ask ourselves, if I'm making a withdrawal means something the child will not enjoy. It might be a rule, it might be a boundary, it might be a sanction of some sort. I've got to ask myself, does the gain justify the withdrawal? What's the reason for the withdrawal? Does the gain justify the withdrawal? And that's a really important, instantaneous assessment as to whether the withdrawal I'm about to make is justified or not. Again, we go into this in much more detail, but that's the bottom line. Does the gain justify the withdrawal? And by the way, if I've had to make a withdrawal, I want to replenish the account as soon as I can. Even if I've had to discipline or introduce a sanction of some sort. That doesn't mean I can't take a drink up to my child who stormed up to their room. Put credit back in as soon as you possibly can. And perhaps the most important thing is pick your battles. Let go as often as possible. Yes, it may be irritating. Yes, it may be frustrating, but let go as often as possible. Will it matter tomorrow? Will it matter in a week? Will they grow out of it? If it won't matter tomorrow, it won't matter in a week. If it will grow out of it, let go as often as possible. And very important for COVID is don't fight the temporary. In other words, for example, some parents were telling me the other day that their children spend the whole day in pajamas. Right? Whole day in pajamas. They'll put on a top for a Zoom meeting, but they spend the day in pajamas. And this irritates the parent enormously. But the reality is they're not going to spend the whole day in pajamas when COVID is over. Yes, I understand. It would irritate me too. But don't fight the temporary. It's just not worth it, and just not sensible, and just not a withdrawal that is worth making. Now, I'm conscious we want to leave time for questions, and okay, I want to come on to screens as well, which is a big issue. But just to elaborate a little bit more on maximizing the positive, those good feel moments, not feel good moments, but good feel moments, where it feels where there's a sense of connection, there's a sense of connectivity, needs to be maximized. It may be here and there. There's a magnificent story of one of the great sages of the 20th century, Moshe Feinstein, who was died in 1980 or so. He was probably the most sought after halachic voice, Jewish law voice in the whole world. And I once read an article by his son. You can imagine that he lived in America. He was known by the rabbinical world, by the Orthodox world, by the non-Orthodox world, by politicians. His home was a very, very busy place. And his son wrote in an article once that he knew 100% how much he meant to his father, not just from the time he spent with his father, but even those busy times. There were two things that his father did for him without fail. Number one, whichever guest they had around the Shabbos table, his father never moved his son's place. His son sat to his right or to his left next to him. His father never moved his son's place. Number two, In the cold New York winters, when father used to get up early in the morning to study, he would creep into his son's room and place his trousers on the radiator. When his son got up in the morning and put his legs into his trousers, it felt warm. Beautiful story of sensitivity. We need to create those good feel moments when we can. Little note, an extra, a treat, supper they're going to like, or whatever it is, sitting down with them on the couch to share something they're watching, important. Openers to talk, look for those openers when our children want to talk. Those throwaway lines, have a rubbish day today. Even if we're busy doing something else, look for those openers to talk, and where possible, spend shared time. Remember, just because I'm ready to listen doesn't mean my child is ready to talk. Sometimes it's when we're doing an activity together that they start opening up. And this is very fast to address all of these, but in essence, maximize the positive. Let's deal very briefly with screens. And I have written over here as a caveat, I don't have a panacea. Sorry, I don't have a panacea. I probably get asked about screens every single day. In fact, when we open it out to the floor, I'm more than happy for people to learn their suggestions. I think I even noticed Mrs. Shani Solomon sneaking in here, who is a tremendous expert in all of these fields. So, and it was the first person to encourage me or cajole me. That's probably the politest way I can put it, to start teaching parenting. So, Shani, when it comes to it, more than happy for your contribution, as always. So here are some practical suggestions without having a panacea. First of all, we must role model ourselves. How are we on screens? How are we with our phones? If we are slaves to our phones, I'm afraid we are not going to be able to persuade our children to be anything else. So it's absolutely vital that we are good role models about the way we use our devices. Absolutely vital. And that is non-negotiable. If we come down for supper with our phone next to us and we respond every time it beeps, I'm afraid we can't really ask our children to do anything else. But let's assume for the moment we are good role models. I think it's important to have some agreed downtime for everybody. So maybe half an hour over dinner or half an hour over lunch if you're working from home or whatever it's going to be. There's got to be some agreed downtime for everybody. And again, that should be non-negotiable. You can have a discussion about how to go about it, or maybe a family discussion about how to go about it. But it's important to have some downtime for everybody. Number 3 is really important, which is to discuss with our teenagers at non-contentious times. Let's assume, as I hear almost every day, that teenagers are spending miles too much time on the screen and it's become the new normal. And it concerns us for all sorts of reasons. Despite the great positivities that it offers, it concerns us for all sorts of reasons. And we recognize they need to interact with their friends and they need to spend time with their peers and they need some downtime from Zoom, and that downtime is going to be spent on screen time. But nonetheless, to discuss at non-contentious times, when we're in a good place, our child's in a good place, and to say to them, look, I really feel that we need to talk about screens because I feel that it has gone a bit too far. Now, in our parenting course, we talk about the fact that a teenager is more likely to take responsibility if we create buy-in. When we insist, they resist. When we engage and empower, they're much more likely to take responsibility. So have a discussion. Say, look, I feel that it's gone too far, and I would like to discuss some restrictions on screen time in the evening. Or I'd like to discuss a switch off time in the evening. Now, you're going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, it's gone too far. So I call this choices within boundaries. You made it clear there has to be some boundaries. What you've left open is how to set those boundaries. Then there's a process of negotiation. I'd really like you to switch off by 11 o'clock. Oh, that's ridiculous, 11 o'clock. That's just when knives get started. Okay, what would you suggest? And you negotiate back and forth. So it is choices within boundaries. And when a teenager is given that option, they're much more likely to buy in. It's amazing, of course, but remember, the reason why teenagers are so independent-minded is because they're being prepared for adult life. It's the stage in their life where Hashem puts them through this process of recalibration, preparing them for adult life. So they're bound to be independent. But we can use that independence to our advantage, because if we can give them an inch, for every inch we'll give them, they will give us a foot. Because if we can utilize that independence so that they feel they've taken responsibility, then I see this work every day, and I've seen this work countless times, it's a skill that requires a little bit of honing, but it's a negotiation skill. And when our child has come to a settlement of some sort, you don't say, that's what I was thinking in the first place. You say, okay, that works for me too. And you don't then give a lecture on trust and everything else. You simply walk away and assume trust. I'm conscious I've been listening for a long time, so I'm going to just take you through the last 3 points and then open it out to the floor. But really, the best way to talk about number 3 is to give various examples. In an ideal world, even do some role play, so that you can think about how to create buy-in. But the bottom line is, it's choices within boundaries and an ability to come to a negotiated position, and for me to then let go, invest trust, and let them take responsibility. The past-COVID conversation. Sorry, that's a typo. I should say post-COVID conversation. Talk now about, no, it isn't a typo, sorry. Talk now about what life will be like past-COVID. I think this is very important to say, you know what, at the moment, there's more screen time. At the moment, things are different. But please God, when things return to some kind of new normality, then we'll have to talk again. It's very important now to prepare them for the fact that these are exceptional circumstances. These are exceptional circumstances. I think if we start introducing that conversation, we're preparing ourselves as a family for post-COVID. Don't just remove, replace. As we all know, a good diet is not where I starve myself. A good diet is where I replace food that is unhealthy with food that is healthy. So if there is going to be downtime, and this will very much depend on the parent-child relationship, and you can say, look, you know, the half an hour between 6 and 6:30 or 6:45, when there's no screens, let's discuss what you'd like to do. Can you replace it with something positive? A game, a walk, an activity, something, whatever it's going to be. Can you replace it with something positive? It's much better rather than simply to remove. If we can replace, be creative in so doing. And of course, not all screen is negative. Encourage positive use. There may even be some time where you can watch something positive together. Maybe as a family that suits all ages, that suits all stages, and you can create some relaxation around the screen, which is positive use and not all negative use. So in brief, do I have a panacea, a magic wand? No, I don't. These I feel are very important suggestions. Role model, agreed downtime for everybody. Discuss at non-contentious times how the teenager can take some responsibility for themselves, utilize their drive for independence positively. Talk about life post-COVID. Don't just remove, replace, and it's not all negative. Maybe we can even find some shared time together, which is going to be positive. So the title of this talk, coming back to the beginning, was Realistic Expectations, holding on and letting go. So holding on and letting go, realistic parenting strategies. So I hope that it's given you some realistic parenting strategies, holding on, letting go, but above all, and I'm going to say this again, I know I'm repeating myself, above all, be realistic with ourselves. Know when to hold on and know when to let go with ourselves. If we do that, that's the best role modeling we can do. Be realistic with ourselves, and that's going to create an environment which is going to be easier to be realistic with our children. Okay, I'm going to stop share now and take questions from the Zoom. You can unmute yourselves or send on chat, whatever you want. Okay, somebody has sent me a funny chat, which is they're so into the share that they forgot to put their children to bed. Okay, questions, comments? On chat or anything else? Okay, what if schools' expectations are unreasonable? Great question. So that's a really good question. As we mentioned last week, schools are really designed to steer our children through to results. I'm going to say something which is a bit controversial. Hope you'll forgive me. But coming from a family of teachers going back several generations, and sometimes we actually have to protect our children from some of the negative aspects of school, even the very best schools. Sometimes we have to protect our children from negative aspects of school and say to our children, you know what, actually, I don't think this is realistic. And let's say, for example, homework. I don't think this is realistic in the current circumstances. I feel that you're doing your very, very best. And actually, either you as a parent will talk to the school or communicate with the school. In best case scenario, there'd be a constant dialogue with the school, especially with children that don't find academia easy, or don't find sitting in the same place easy. There'd be a constant dialogue with the school to work out a realistic expectation for your child. As I said last week, the most important thing is their emotional well-being. GCSEs come in second place, in my view. So if the school is being unrealistic, first and foremost, talk to the school and have a dialogue with the school. If you won't get anywhere with the school in that respect, then priority is actually your children. And you have to work through with your children what is realistic, what is not realistic, and actually say to them, actually, on this occasion, I'm afraid I think the school is not being realistic, and maybe they don't fully appreciate the circumstances, and we're going to do this and not that, and we'll manage the consequences, and I'll help you deal with the consequences. Now, of course, generally as parents, we never want to undermine the school. Of course we don't. We always have to back the school, otherwise we undermine the authority of the school. But if we genuinely feel that the school is setting unrealistic expectations and the school is not being cooperative in dealing with that, then we have to step in and find ways of saying, look, the school's doing its best, and the school is giving you a lot. Let's assume in the moment the child is happy at school, but actually we know the situation sometimes better than the school. Sometimes we do, and in the current exceptional circumstances, we're going to make the following allowances because I think that's more important, and that's what you can manage, and it'll be fantastic to manage that. By the way, we want our children to feel like successes, not failures. We want our children to be able to feel that they are doing well. And if we come back to my definition of parenting, it is to find their goal in this world, managing their unique strengths and their unique weaknesses. So I want my children to feel successful, not as a failure. So sometimes, what can we do? We have to protect our children, even from the best of schools. That's a strong way of putting it. I know it's a strong way of putting it. But unfortunately, I know people over the years where the school has unfortunately not done great for their self-esteem. And they've taken years to realize that they can be successful and will be successful, even if they weren't necessarily successful at school. That's what I'm going to say on that one. Let's have a look at other questions on chat here. I should say that today, many schools are much more in tune with emotional well-being than they used to be in days gone by. Many schools have got a good quality pastoral care, and therefore, oops, what do I do this now? Good quality pastoral care, and therefore there is a very strong chance that the school will be cooperative. Oh no, what have I done here? That's right. Okay. Let's have a look at this. Our eldest son has never enjoyed spending time with his younger siblings. He is a good boy, but they get on his nerves and will prefer to spend most times up in his room. I feel he's just struggling through lockdown himself, and we are terrible at small talk. I find it difficult to initiate conversation, but I'm finding it difficult to find out how Rio feels and coping with everything. What would you suggest? So an eldest son who has difficulty getting on with his siblings, not particularly conversive, spending time in his room during lockdown, difficulty to initiate conversation. What would I suggest? Okay, so what I'm going to say in terms of answering these questions is that every child is a world, every family is a world, and every question really requires much more specific analysis to understand the dynamics at home, to understand the relationship at home, to understand the history of the child, how they see themselves in the family. So it's very difficult to answer in a specific question with specific strategies. So what I'm going to do is use this question to talk about some principles, basically, of parenting. But this. So the questions that I would be asking, I'm not asking for a response now because these are this would involve asking someone for private information. But to talk about first of all, I don't know how many siblings there are, which is important. I don't know how the youngest sibling is, which is important. We don't know how the young man is doing at school. but it's clearly struggling within himself in certain respects, and we need to find ways of reaching out to him and understanding him. So as general principles, what I would do is look for those fragments, and there may well be fragments, where he is a bit communicative. And I would say I'm going to say 2 or 3 principles. Those moments where he might be communicative might be a throwaway moment where he throws out a comment, had a rubbish day today, or I really don't like school anymore, whatever it is, where he's throwing you out a line. Do you catch that line, and when you respond to it? Might be if he allows you to say goodnight to him in bed when he's sitting on his bed, and you sit a little bit longer, and you actually say one evening, you know what, I'm not going to rush. Who knows what it'll be? It might be where you're doing some parallel activity together. That means not a task-based activity, something that you both enjoy doing. It might be cooking or going for a walk or whatever it is, or playing a game where he throws away a line and you open it up. So look for those fragments and listen during those fragments. Simply listen. I'm sorry that school is hard. I didn't realize. Don't say, tell me all about it. Just listen. Open the door and let him speak. To mix my metaphors here. That's very, very important. That's principle number 1. Because often a child will test whether we can listen or will listen, and it takes time for the child to build up confidence in us as listeners. Very important. It can take confidence, take time for a child to build up confidence in us as listeners. It may take several of these types of occasions for a child to then speak a little bit more. Number 2, are there things that he does enjoy doing so I can meet him on his terms? Maybe he's got an interest in sport. Maybe he's got an interest in, I don't know, cars or something. Maybe he's got a hobby that I don't normally take an interest in. Can I take an interest? Can I meet him on his turf? Very important. Maybe there's a particular program he enjoys watching that I don't, but I'll watch it with him. I want to create a kind of synergy of some sort. By the way, before I forget, I do a 90-second WhatsApp video, which goes out once a month or so. It's supposed to go out once a month. Went out today. If you're interested in the 90-second WhatsApp video, 90-second parenting, then I'll put it on chat. If you can someone do it for me? I'm sorry. roz@seed.uk.net. 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 She'll send you details of the WhatsApp contact. As I said, multitasking isn't my thing. I'm not going to try it. So that is a second principle. Can you meet him on his terms? Now, and then it's important about having. Third principle is about having real conversations. In those moments, to actually say to him, be brave enough to say to him, let's say his name is Shimmy. Shimmy, I can see that you find it very difficult with your siblings. Just open-ended question, open-ended comment. You don't say, would you like to talk about it? I can see you find it very difficult with your siblings sometimes. Open-ended comment. Just see. Give him that opportunity to talk. Has he had that opportunity to talk? What would happen if he does talk? And then you validate those feelings. So those are the kind of 3 strategies and by the way, there are other ways of communicating as well. So for example, again, in our parenting series, we talk about dropping a note, giving a child a note. It might be a note by their bedside. Communicate even without necessarily expecting a response. Again, we've given him the name Shimmy. Shimmy, it was nice spending time with you today. Shimmy, I hope that your test goes well tomorrow. Shimmy, so pleased that your team have done so well. So find other ways of communicating and conversing, even if they're not initially reciprocal. That's very important. Those are the 3 strategies that immediately come to mind. If anybody else would like to suggest anything else, more than happy for you to unmute yourself and contribute, especially if Shani is still online here somewhere. Are you, Shani? Are you out there? No, maybe not. Okay. Okay. Right, let's have a look at where we're up to. Just to add one more thing, you write here that you're terrible at small talk, but that is, for a child, that can be very important. So one has to, what shall I say, practice at it, if you like. practice at it, and as I say, engage him where it works for him. Okay, how do you do an unhealthy friendship to a 13-year-old boy? Friendship with a boy who literally lives next door. Okay, again, that is complex without knowing more details. What makes it unhealthy? And that would be very important to know what makes it unhealthy. And remember, peer pressure is extremely, extremely difficult for a 13-year-old. So what makes it unhealthy? What does he see in the relationship? So I would favor, again, when parents ask me questions, I don't claim great expertise. The best I can give you is to think what I would do. Think what I would do. So in a situation like this, I would want to talk to my son about it and to discuss with him, if there is a good relationship, why I feel it is unhealthy, and explain to him why I feel that maybe there's a negative influence of some sort. And then we'd have to talk about strategies as to how to, very difficult when he lives next door, how to maybe put some boundaries on the friendship, how to help develop friendships elsewhere, how to nurture friendships elsewhere. So again, it's difficult to answer in detail, but answer in principles. First and foremost is a conversation. Conversation presupposes a good relationship. If a relationship is not good or is weak, then I first and foremost have to work on the relationship, because I can't have a dialogue like this unless the relationship is in a good place, because he's searching for connections elsewhere. If I've got a good connection with him, I can help him handle what I feel to be negative connections elsewhere. If I don't, it's much more difficult. So let's assume for the moment the relationship is good. So I would like to have a conversation with him. I'd like to talk to him about it. I'd like to explain when he's in the right place, I'm in the right place, why I feel it's unhealthy, and then talk about developing other friendships and strategies for dealing with it. That's as much as I can say without knowing more details. Okay. This is about boundaries. And the children set themselves boundaries and break them very quickly. Do we try and discuss this or punish them for breaking boundaries? Sometimes it backfires. Okay. Do we need them to give them space until they mature? So in essence, boundaries are set with the children, which they set themselves, but they break them very quickly. So first of all, again, I'm going to answer this in principle. In principle, we need to know whether the boundaries we are setting are sensible boundaries. So in part 3 of our parenting series, then we talk about how to set appropriate boundaries. Are they, we have a mnemonic, AC/DC, are they achievable? Are they clear? Are they doable? Are they consistent? So appropriate boundaries is very, very important. Again, our goal is to help our children succeed, not fail. So I prefer to set a lower boundary that they're going to succeed at, and I can salute them for, than a higher boundary which is going to set them up to fail. Because ultimately, what we're doing, when we think about our overarching role as a parent, is inaugurating our children. So inaugurating our children means helping them take responsibility and live up to the responsibilities that they have taken. So the best way to do that is to help them achieve, not set them up to fail. And very often this brings us to the core question, am I in it for them or in it for us? If I'm in it for us, then very often I'm going to set a boundary which is just unrealistic. If I'm in it for them, it means I've got to be more patient, let them graduate slowly, let them mature slowly. So in principle, first of all, I have to ask myself, are the boundaries good boundaries? Are they sensible boundaries? Are they appropriate boundaries? And I prefer to lower the boundary so they can succeed and then be able to endorse them for the fact they took responsibility. Now, depending on the age of the children over here, if they've broken boundaries, then that needs a discussion. That needs a discussion. And the importance of trust in a non-contentious time, that needs a discussion. Punishment is always a last resort, not a first response. Punishment can be appropriate, depending on the age of the child, depending on the strength of the relationship, and depending on what I'm trying to achieve by it. Punishment is a withdrawal. Is the withdrawal going to be worth it or not? So I've got to have clarity as to what do I want to achieve by the punishment. So I've gone through the process of positive reinforcement. I've gone through the process of explain to them why I'm disappointed. I've gone through everything else, and as a last resort, I feel that this child may actually only learn with some kind of sanction, and I feel confident that I can carry it through, then it may well be a problem. That's in general life in general terms. At the moment in COVID, we have got to take an easier place. We've got to let go as often as we can, as we've said, and pick our battles very, very judiciously. Let go as often as we possibly can. So therefore, everything I've said has got to be diluted for the current COVID environment, which means that I set the bar even lower, which means I punish very, very infrequently. It means that I endorse more often, and I have a proper conversation with the children, but I also introduce the fact that we're living in unprecedented times, and there will be a future beyond this where life will change again. So I would say that at the moment, that is it. If you feel that you're not going to win, and all you're doing is boundaries, failure, punishment, boundaries, failure, punishment, then I'm afraid that's not a good strategy. All that's going to do, God forbid, is fray the relationship, and there'll be no positivity, no credit from the withdrawal. Okay. Okay, how can you help a child with high anxiety about the pandemic? Okay, that is a very important question. Again, I can only answer in principle because there are lots of questions that need to be discussed if one was to deal with this in detail. So, for example, did they have anxiety before the pandemic, which the pandemic has exacerbated? What do you mean by high anxiety? How does it manifest itself? Which is important. A very important question is there anxiety in the home generally? How are we as parents handling it? Are we anxious people or not anxious people? Now, some people, no one's laying any blame over here. It's just we're all wired differently, and some people are more able to handle anxious moments. Some are less able to handle anxious moments. That's just the way we are wired. So, but if there's a reality that I am an anxious person, then that's going to create anxiety at home, and that will translate through. If that's the case, then it's not just the child who needs help with their anxiety. Maybe the parent also needs help with their anxiety. What's also important, and these are the questions that we need to be asked in detail, is how old is the child? What are they being exposed to? I do not believe in giving our children the statistics every day of the death rate. It's grim, it's horrendous. And to share it around the supper table, there's under 1,000 people today, whatever it was, whatever it is. It's horrendous and it's grim. And I don't believe I believe our children need to be kept up to date, but I don't believe that they should watch every last fragment of news with all of the anxiety that brings. I believe we live in a totally ridiculously overexposed world, which gives our children an unrealistic sense of what's normal and what's not. And this is a whole other topic of conversation, which I feel quite strongly. I feel strongly that our children do not really have a sense of reality anymore, because the media is so powerful, graphic, and all pervasive. They don't really understand what is regular, not regular, and that's a general. And therefore, children generally, I feel, are probably more anxious than we were as children. Probably, certainly than I was as a child, without question. Okay, so but in terms of helping a child with anxiety, so there are a number of helping mechanisms. First and foremost, again, is proper listening, empathy, to allow their child to articulate their anxiety without us flinching, and to allow the child to say what they're anxious about, and to allow the child to say what is it you're worried about. And then there are a number of coping mechanisms. There's some very good books on the topic. Coping mechanisms. Once a child feels heard, then they're much more likely to hear. But to say things to the child like, what can you say to reassure yourself? This is something I learned from a great child psychotherapist, Dr. Pelkovic. What can you say to reassure yourself? And if the child struggles, I don't know, then play a game. And even for an older child, for a teenager, you know what? I'll say something I'll say one thing, and then you say one thing. What can you say to reassure yourself? Now, probably if there's real anxiety, this needs professional help, and I'm not going to step into areas beyond my area of strength, if you like, but that's a very important technique. What can you say to reassure yourself? Why do I say that? Because actually with anxiety, strangely enough, to always take it away, don't worry, you don't have to worry about it at all, and guarantee you have to worry, is actually not helping the child in the long term, because it means they don't learn to cope with their own anxieties. So if the levels of anxieties are really high, then one does need professional help to give parents the tools to help our child through it. Those are some of the things in the short term that might help. What we say to reassure yourself and to listen, to empathize. But if it's really high levels of anxiety, then I would suggest that one needs probably a therapist help to help parents and children coping mechanisms. Okay, we're going to go a little bit further. Do you think it's important for teenagers to stay connected with children their own age if they don't seem interested in staying connected themselves? I don't fully understand the question. You mean the children don't look to be connected? I think it's what it means. Should you encourage that connection? Look, there are some children who need more social interaction than others. As long as it's not at extreme levels, the child's hiding themselves in their room, not communicating with anybody at all, that would be extreme and require help. But some children need more social interaction, some need less. Some children are quite happy being at home, and some need, that interaction outside of the home. So it's really going to depend on if basically there is social interaction, they are connecting, but you'd like them to be a bit more, but generally they're happy, generally they're wholesome, and generally they're doing well, and generally they're managing, then it wouldn't worry me, unless, as I say, they were unhappy or it was gone to extremes. But if overall they're a happy child and they need their friends less than others do, then personally it wouldn't worry me. That's in principle without knowing more details. Okay. I think it looks to me as though we have covered all their questions. If anyone wants to come off mute to ask a question, another 5 minutes, we can. Otherwise, we will close it here. Before I close, I just want to thank Dana. This is, I think, the third course that we have put together, which is great. Is it the third or fourth? I've actually lost track now. Certainly at least the third. And Dana is one of those people that lots of people say that's a good idea, but Dana isn't. Dana says, that's a good idea, I'm going to help make it happen. And really does so with that, just gets on with it and makes it happen. So thank you very much for making it happen for the third time. Again, I'm going to thank Jonathan Louise and the RNCT for their wonderful support. These courses really only happen via me and others within our team because they give us such encouragement and support in parenting. And I will say that, let's not forget that I believe very, very strongly that this whole process, this whole period has been divinely orchestrated. And I will just finish with this. I think it's important as a family to ask ourselves, what will we take as a positive legacy from Corona? What will we take? One thing we're going to do to connect with ourselves, connect with each other, connect with Hashem, one positive thing we're going to do. I'm going to give you one example from my own home, because I want to show you that it doesn't have to be a great, big, life-changing thing. I wanted to find something that would capture the idea of family time, capture the idea that the Almighty is in charge, and capture the idea that we thank God for his blessings. So we decided that we were going to concentrate a little bit better on our Birkat HaMazon, our grace after meals, at Shabbat lunch. That's it. At Shabbat lunch, before grace after meals, I give a 30-second thought on Birkat HaMazon. Easy to find, 30-second thought. And that's something we've decided to take away from us. Even when hopefully, please God soon, this whole thing is history, there'll be something positive that we can take out of it. So I would suggest that as a family, sit down around the table, have a discussion. What can we take that will be a positive legacy from Corona? Okay. Thank you one and all. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Herman.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.